get you home now.
I think that's a really good idea.
Moved to the main island of Japan.
We need to be able to predict these. The fact that it's supposed to happen every 150 years.
How soon before you get it fixed?
Call Martinez.
That's our first game this weekend, so I figure we cruise up the coast, do a little camp.
24 hours. Where the hell is Falco, Nevada? They're up me fall. And we are predicting them.
I'm sure I could figure out a way to fit it in.
Right, great. I can't find...
I'd love to take you to dinner. You could even invite your mom along. It'd be fun.
That's spiky.
I won't. I got it.
Since we've been
Before California splits open and the ground swallows everything whole, the movie drops you straight into chaos. Not earthquake chaos, not yet. A teenage girl has driven her car off a winding mountain road somewhere in the California hills, and now it's hanging above a ravine, wedged into wire guardrails, held up by nothing you'd want to bet your life on. The camera shows you the drop beneath. It's a long way down. San Andreas 2015 knows exactly what it's doing from the very first frame. Ray Gaines, Dwayne Johnson, broad-shouldered and calm in a way that reads as almost physically impossible given what's happening around him, is part of the LAFD helicopter rescue team that responds. Watch the team work. There's no posturing, no hero music, no dramatic speech before they go in. Just the radio, the equipment checks, the descent. Ray drops on a line to the teetering car and talks to the girl the entire time, keeping her focused, keeping her tethered to his voice while the metal groans around her. He gets her out through the shattered window, and then the car goes. It just falls, crashing and tumbling down the ravine while Ray hangs there on the line, the girl pressed against him, both of them alive. That's your first exhale of the movie. What Brad Peyton does in this opening sequence is economical, almost to the point of being elegant, which is a word you don't often associate with a film that later involves a 9.6 magnitude earthquake and a cargo ship riding a tsunami into the Golden Gate Bridge. But the character work here is done fast. By the time Ray's boots hit the helicopter floor again, you know everything essential about him. He's skilled, he puts himself in harm's way without making it about himself, and he cares. Genuinely. Not in a performance of caring, but in the actual thing. That'll matter. The entire film hinges on it. Cut to Ray's personal life, and things are considerably less controlled. He and his wife, Emma, are in the middle of a divorce. Emma, Carla Gugino, doing more with quiet moments than most actors do with speeches, is in the process of moving into the home of her new partner, Daniel Riddick. Daniel is played by Ioan Gruffudd with the particular energy of someone who has never been made uncomfortable. He's polished, wealthy, charming in the way that money makes charming easy. His apartment is all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling glass with views that cost obscene amounts per square foot. Emma is packing her things, transitioning into a different life. The divorce is civil. That almost makes it sadder. There's something Ray and Emma don't talk about directly in these early scenes. A grief that sits below the surface of every exchange. A wound that's older and deeper than the separation itself. The movie holds it back deliberately. You notice the way they move around each other. Careful, like people who have learned not to press on something that hasn't healed. Their daughter Blake, played by Alexandra Daddario with that combination of intelligence and open-hearted warmth that makes her immediately easy to root for, is 18 years old and about to start college. Smart, resourceful, fiercely self-possessed. You can see both her parents in her, Ray's physical confidence, Emma's composure. She's the kind of person who handles bad news calmly and panics internally, if she panics at all. Blake was supposed to go to San Francisco with her dad. That was the plan. Ray taking time off, flying her up, a proper father-daughter trip before the next chapter of her life kicked off. The kind of thing you arrange when you're trying to hold on to something, to stay connected, to matter in the life of someone who is inevitably moving forward. Then the call comes, a rescue operation. Ray can't get out of it. He tries. You can see that he tries, but the team needs him, and he's not the kind of man who can say no to that. So Blake, gracious and easy about it the way she always is, "It's fine, Dad, it's fine," ends up going to San Francisco with Daniel instead. He's got a building project in the city. He's heading there anyway. It makes practical sense. That goodbye between Ray and Blake is brief, unremarkable. The kind of goodbye where you don't linger because you're assuming there will be 100 more of them. Ray says he'll come up as soon as he can. She smiles. The car pulls away. I love how the film handles that moment by not handling it at all. No swelling music, no lingering close-up, no underscoring of the significance. You only feel the weight of it in retrospect. That's good filmmaking. Daniel Riddick in these early scenes isn't quite a villain yet. That designation comes later, earned through a specific act of cowardice that we'll get to. Right now, he's just a certain kind of man. One who expresses affection through resources rather than presence. He got Blake a hotel suite. He's paying for her meals. He offers solutions where Ray would offer himself. It's easy to see what Emma found in him after years of loss and grief and a marriage slowly coming apart. He's stable. He's generous. He doesn't carry visible pain around like luggage. Whether that's a virtue or a warning sign depends on what you think people need. Emma isn't naive about it. She's a grown woman making a considered choice, not running from something, or at least that's the story she's been telling herself. She chose forward. She chose easier. Whether easier turns out to be better is a question the earthquake is about to answer for her. Simultaneously, in Pasadena, something is waking up. Dr. Lawrence Hayes, Paul Giamatti, giving the performance of a man who has been right about something terrible and doesn't know whether to feel vindicated or horrified, is a seismologist at Caltech. He and his research partner Kim Park Will-Yun Lee have spent years developing a method for predicting earthquakes, not just monitoring seismic activity after the fact, but predicting it, identifying precursor signals, running models, giving warnings before the ground moves. The scientific community has been skeptical, the funding has been difficult, but the algorithm is working. The problem is what it's saying. Hayes and Park are at Hoover Dam, that enormous curved wall of concrete that holds back Lake Mead, when Hayes's instruments start reading something that shouldn't be there. The dam was built with the assumption that the ground beneath it is stable. That assumption, it turns out, was overconfident. A fault nobody knew about is shifting. The readings don't make sense at first. Then they make terrible sense. Hayes is on the phone, running calculations, his voice dropping to that very specific register of a scientist who has moved from hypothesis to proof in the worst possible way. Kim Park is cross-referencing everything, trying to find the error, wanting to find the error. There isn't one. Something massive is coming. What the first act of San Andreas does, and does well, honestly, is manage these parallel storylines without either one feeling like a detour. Ray's world is warm and physical, the helicopter, the team, the personal complications of a man whose professional life is the one thing still intact. Bulls is cold and technical, laboratories and algorithms, the academic language that makes catastrophe sound even more clinical and therefore more frightening. These two worlds are about to slam into each other. Before that, the movie takes a final quiet moment in Ray's story. He mentions, almost in passing, a younger daughter. The way his face changes when the subject comes near, shuttered, careful, a door closing before you can see inside, tells you everything you need to know about how long he's been carrying this. Emma knows the shape of that grief. Blake knows. It lives between the three of them like something that can never quite be said out loud. Not yet. There's a girl named Mallory who didn't make it. The movie won't tell you the details here. It makes you wait. But that unspoken backstory is the real reason for everything. The divorce, the distance, the way Ray throws himself into work with the intensity of someone who needs to be useful because he couldn't be useful when it mattered most. The earthquake is a test. But the fear underneath the earthquake, the real one, the one Ray carries in his chest, is that he'll fail the people he loves again. Ray's professional world in these early minutes has a texture to it that's worth noting. The team banter at the LAFD base, the pre-flight routines, the easy familiarity of people who have done dangerous things together and come out the other side. Ray is their leader, but he's not remote. He gives them a hard time. He laughs. It's the particular camaraderie of people who trust each other completely because they've had to. That life, defined and purposeful, built on skill and trust, is the one solid thing he still has. Everything else is in pieces. San Andreas understands this about Ray without spelling it out in exposition. It shows you the rescue. It shows you the goodbye with Blake. It shows you the grief behind his eyes when the wrong subject comes up. And then it gives him a helicopter and points him north and lets you understand, without anyone saying it, that this man will move the earth itself to get his family back. The ground shifts under Hoover Dam. A crack appears in the concrete, 726 feet of concrete. If you've ever stood at the base of Hoover Dam, you know what that number actually feels like. A wall of engineered stone so massive that it physically changes the air pressure around you. The Colorado River, one of the great wild forces of the American West, stopped dead because of it, held back, tamed. Dam is supposed to be the kind of thing that doesn't fail, that outlasts the people who built it, that sits in the Nevada desert as permanent as the canyon it spans. San Andreas has other plans for it. Ives and Kim Park have driven out to the dam site as part of their ongoing research, running instruments, collecting data, doing the quiet, repetitive work of scientists who believe they've found something important and are still waiting for the world to agree with them. A journalist is along for the ride, doing a piece on Hayes' earthquake prediction algorithm. She's professional, curious, a little skeptical in the way that TV journalists often are when covering topics that require sustained technical attention. Hayes is used to that skepticism. He's been fighting it for years. The instruments, though, are not skeptical. The instruments are certain. Ark notices it first, a reading that shouldn't be there, from a fault system that wasn't supposed to be active under this part of Nevada. He calls Hayes over. Hayes looks at the numbers. And here's the thing about Paul Giamatti's performance in this moment. There's no dramatic pause, no cinematic swelling of realization. It's instant. One look and his entire body changes. Not in a showy, theatrical way, but in the specific way that people change when their worst professional fear stops being theoretical. He doesn't launch into an explanation. He says they need to leave. That's all. The urgency in his voice does the work that a longer speech wouldn't. Giamatti has always been good at fear, not the screaming, running kind, but the cold, private kind that happens in the face when someone understands something terrible before they've figured out what to do about it. Park starts gathering the equipment. The journalist starts asking questions. Hayes is already moving. Kim Park goes back. A young girl, a child, a visitor to the dam, separated from her family in the confusion of sudden evacuation, is still inside. Park sees her. He doesn't deliberate. He turns around and runs back toward the dam while everyone else is running away from it. That's the whole of Kim Park's heroism, and it's told in about 8 seconds of screen time. The film doesn't slow down for it. No swelling score, no close-up of a meaningful look exchanged with Hayes. He just goes. The decision has already been made somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Some place in him where the math is simple, there's a child, he can help, therefore he helps. Some characters earn your investment through backstory. Park earns it by running the wrong direction. The dam breaks. That groan, low, structural, almost subsonic, precedes the crack by several seconds. You feel it more than hear it. The CGI work in this sequence is among the film's best, partly because Hoover Dam is so familiar that watching it fail bypasses the part of your brain that processes things as movie effects. The crack becomes a split. The split becomes a gap. The gap becomes a wall of white water that moves not like flooding but like displacement, like the river has simply decided it was tired of being contained. Kim Park doesn't make it out. Hayes watches. The girl beside him, the one he managed to pull clear, is pressed against him and he doesn't move. He stands there holding her while the water runs below, and the specific stillness in Giamatti's face in that shot is one of the better pieces of acting in the film. Grief doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it just arrives in the eyes while the rest of you stays very still. After that, Hayes has a job to do. He makes calls. He calls colleagues at Caltech. He calls emergency management contacts. He calls news networks. The science has just gone from predictive to proven, and the proof cost Kim Park his life, and Hayes is not going to let that be for nothing. He needs the warning out. The problem, and this is the cruel irony baked into his entire professional situation, is that the warning sounds exactly like the warning he's been issuing for years, the one that people have been politely acknowledging and quietly deprioritizing. How do you warn a city when the city has heard you before? Hayes doesn't waste time on that frustration. There's no "I told you so" energy in him right now. He's too far past anger for that. He's running on something purer and more desperate, the specific urgency of a person who can see what's coming and is running out of time to make anyone else see it too. He gets on camera. He gets on every camera that will have him. He explains the fault connection. He explains the foreshock model. He explains what a 9.1 looks like on a scale that a non-scientist can understand. Something to the effect of, every major fault in the state is under stress. Los Angeles is at the intersection of all of it. People need to get out of buildings. People need to move to open ground. His voice has that quality of controlled urgency that's worse, somehow, than shouting. Shouting you can dismiss. This you can't. Back at Caltech, the seismometers jump. 7.1. For most people alive in California, a 7.1 would be the earthquake, the one they talk about for the rest of their lives, the one that shaped a before and after in their personal history. A 7.1 causes structural damage. It kills people. It splits roads and drops bridges and makes buildings groan in ways they were never designed to groan. A 7.1 is a catastrophe by any ordinary measure. Hayes barely registers it, because he knows what it is. Not the event, the warning, a foreshock. The Nevada rupture released stored stress along the fault network, and that stress had to go somewhere, and it went into the San Andreas. The 7.1 is the fault clearing its throat. Picture the Caltech monitoring station, banks of screens, data feeds updating in near real time, seismograph lines spiking and settling and spiking again. Hayes is standing in front of them, and the number on his screen is not the 7.1. The 7.1 is already behind him. The number he's watching is the magnitude projection for what comes next, running through his algorithm's final calculation. 9.1. For Los Angeles. That's not a natural disaster. That's closer to a geological extinction event for a city of 4 million people. Buildings designed to withstand 7.1 are not buildings designed to withstand 9.1. Infrastructure built in the 1970s and 1980s is not infrastructure that survives ground acceleration at that scale. Hayes knows the city. He knows the density of it, the age of its construction, the underground networks of water and gas lines that become bombs when the ground moves hard enough. He knows what a 9.1 does to all of that. The journalist who was with him at the dam, shaken, covered in dam dust, not remotely in journalism mode anymore, helps Hayes get in front of a broadcast camera. He doesn't do a polished media presentation. He does what he actually does, which is explain science clearly and directly and without padding. The San Andreas fault has been triggered. This is going to be the largest seismic event in recorded California history. Everyone on the West Coast needs to understand what is coming. Something like that. The point isn't the specific words, it's the face of a man saying them, a face that has just watched his friend die, that has just run the final numbers, that has no reason left to hedge or soften anything. Los Angeles doesn't hear him in time. San Francisco doesn't hear him at all, not before it matters. Blake Gaines is somewhere in that city right now, in a car with Daniel Riddick, probably looking at the Bayview, probably not watching the news. Ray is still in Los Angeles. Emma is in a restaurant on a high floor of a glass building. Hayes is the only person in the film who understands the full picture, and the full picture is that the next few hours are going to change everything for all of them. The seismometers are still moving. The lines on the screen don't stop. Emma has no idea. She's at lunch in a rooftop restaurant somewhere in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of place with cloth napkins and views that make you feel like the city exists purely for your enjoyment. 30-something floors up, the skyline laid out below like something built for a postcard. She's there with Daniel and his sister Susan, played by Kylie Minogue in what amounts to a brief but warm cameo. They're eating, they're talking. The wine is probably good. The restaurant is full. Ray is airborne when it hits. He's on duty, heading toward a standard rescue call, his crew around him in the helicopter cabin. The radio crackles with something that isn't a rescue call. A second later, Los Angeles answers Hayes' prediction with everything it has. 9.1. The ground doesn't shake. It moves. A different thing entirely, the distinction being that shaking implies something that starts and stops, something you can brace against. What a 9.1 does is remove the ground's credibility as a stable surface. The buildings don't know what to do with that. They were designed with assumptions baked into every beam and bolt, assumptions about what the earth beneath them would and wouldn't do. Those assumptions die in the first 4 seconds. Glass, that's the first thing that goes. Windows at every level of every glass-faced downtown tower blowing outward in sheets, catching the afternoon light for one strangely beautiful half-second before they become a falling hazard. The streets below are already rivers of debris and people in motion, and then the glass comes down on top of all of it, and the word chaos stops being adequate for what's happening. Up in the restaurant, Emma has about 3 seconds of confusion before the floor pitches. Tables slide. Glasses go. Someone screams. The building, which is doing exactly what modern high-rises are engineered to do, flex rather than shatter, sway rather than collapse, is moving in a way that no amount of architectural explanation makes less terrifying when you're inside it. Emma grabs the table edge. Daniel grabs Emma. Susan is on the far side of the room, and then a section of ceiling comes down. The film cuts between the street level, the wider devastation, the city disassembling itself block by block, and the restaurant, and this cross-cutting is doing 2 things at once. It keeps you from getting numb to scale by returning you to something personal every few seconds. You care about Emma. You care about this specific room and these specific people. The city falling apart matters more because these individuals are inside it. Susan Riddick doesn't make it. The movie handles this quickly, not brutally. She's there, and then she isn't, in the way that real disaster works. Not announced, not dramatized, just gone. It gives Kylie Minogue's character more weight in death than most disaster films give their peripheral characters in life. You felt her warmth in the few minutes she had. The loss lands. Daniel is across the room from Emma now, and the path between them is broken and dangerous. Smoke is coming from somewhere. The building's emergency systems are either non-functional or overwhelmed. Floors above them are unstable. You watch Daniel do the calculation, and I mean watch it, because Ewan Gruffudd plays this without dialogue, just a sequence of micro-expressions that tell you exactly what kind of man he is when the cost of helping someone else becomes personal. He goes for the stairs. Without Emma, that single choice is Daniel Riddick's entire character completed. Everything the first act suggested about him, the transactional warmth, the generosity that always came attached to something, the absence of visible sacrifice in anything he did, resolves here into one clear image: a man walking away from a woman who needed him because the math didn't work in his favor. He rationalizes it, probably. He tells himself there was nothing he could do. He might even believe it. The movie doesn't follow him far enough to care. Ray sees the skyline change from the air. Downtown Los Angeles, from a helicopter above it, looks like someone pressed fast forward on a construction time-lapse but ran it in reverse. Buildings that were standing are no longer standing. Dust is rising in columns from every direction. The freeway below has sections that have simply dropped. The fire department radio traffic goes from structured communication to something closer to noise as every unit in the city tries to respond to everything simultaneously. Ray's pilot training kicks in and his personal instincts kick in at the same time, pulling in opposite directions for exactly 1 beat. He has a duty. He has a team. He has a deployment order. He also has Emma's phone number memorized, and he calls it. She picks up. She's on a rooftop, the building's roof, having climbed up from the restaurant floor because going down wasn't an option. Around her, sections of the building's upper structure are crumbling. The air is dust. She's bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and her voice is steady in the way that very frightened people's voices sometimes go steady when they realize being frightened won't help. "I'm on the roof," she tells him, something like that. The exact words aren't what matter. What matters is Ray's face when he hears her voice. He banks the helicopter. His crew knows what he's doing. They don't say anything. Or maybe they do and it doesn't register because Ray is already moving, already recalculating the route, already somewhere ahead of the moment he's physically in. His whole professional life has been about getting to people who are in danger. The fact that this particular person is his estranged wife, the fact that nothing about their personal situation is resolved or simple, none of that changes the fundamental equation for him. She needs help. He can provide it. End of deliberation. The approach to the rooftop is tight. Debris in the air, the building shedding material from its upper floors, wind that's been destabilized by the heat of dozens of fires at street level, all competing with each other. The helicopter can't land. He brings it close enough, low enough, and goes himself. He gets to Emma. The rooftop sequence is shot with a kind of compressed intensity. The focus stays on the two of them, on the physical problem of getting both people onto a helicopter from a crumbling surface, and it works because by this point you're invested in both of them as separate people with a complicated history, not just as the couple in the disaster movie. The moment Ray's hand closes around Emma's arm has weight to it that goes beyond the physical danger. He has her. She's safe. The building can do what it wants. They get airborne. Below them, Los Angeles is unrecognizable. The Dwayne Johnson disaster movie tradition demands at least one shot of the star against a backdrop of apocalyptic scale, and San Andreas delivers it here. Ray and Emma in the helicopter, the city spreading out beneath them in ruins, smoke rising from every district as far as the eye can reach. It's the kind of image that would feel gratuitous in a lesser film. Here it earns its spectacle because you've just spent several minutes at human scale inside that disaster, and the pullback to the wide view hits differently for it. Emma tells Ray about Daniel. She doesn't editorialize. She states the fact, he left, he got himself out, he didn't come back for her. Ray's reaction is very contained, which is somehow more alarming than if he'd raged. The jaw sets. The eyes stay forward. He asks one question. Where is Blake? San Francisco. With Daniel. Ray and Emma are now pointing north, and everything that follows in the film is shaped by that decision. A father and his ex-wife in a helicopter above a broken city, flying toward the next disaster because their daughter is somewhere inside it. The personal and the catastrophic have become completely inseparable. You can't solve one without surviving the other. Two things are true at the same time in this helicopter. First, the professional calculation. Getting from Los Angeles to San Francisco by air is a specific problem with specific variables. Fuel, range, the condition of airspace over a state in the middle of its largest recorded seismic event. Ray is working all of that, checking instruments, thinking ahead. Second, the personal weight. He failed to take Blake to San Francisco himself. He passed her off to Daniel, and Daniel just abandoned Emma on a rooftop. That thought, unspoken, sits in the helicopter with them for the entire flight. Emma looks out the window at what used to be Los Angeles. We need to find her, she says, or something close to it. Ray already knows. San Francisco, before the earthquake, is stunning. Blake sees it the way anyone sees it, on a first real visit. The bay catching afternoon light, the hills stacked with buildings that seem too steep to be practical, the bridges laid across the water like punctuation. She's 18 and about to start a new chapter, and the city ahead of her looks like the right place for that. There's a particular kind of optimism that belongs to being that age in a beautiful place, and the film gives her a few quiet seconds of it. She's earned them. She won't get many more. Daniel's energy in San Francisco is different from Ray's energy anywhere. Where Ray occupies space physically, confidently, with the ease of a man who trusts his own body completely, Daniel occupies space financially. He knows which building they're going to, which floor, which office. His people have arranged things. The logistics of his life run smoothly because he pays them to run smoothly. He doesn't carry his own bags. He doesn't open his own doors. Cold about it. He's not cold about it. He's just accustomed, which is its own kind of distance. Blake is polite with him, warm even. She's not naive about what Daniel is or about what his relationship with her mother represents, but she's also not the kind of person who makes things difficult out of principle. She gives people fair chances. It's one of her best qualities, and, in this particular situation, it means she's still giving Daniel the benefit of the doubt when she really shouldn't be. They pull into an underground parking garage below Daniel's development site, a half-finished skyscraper that will become very important later, and the world above them is still intact. The city is still standing. Pulse's broadcasts are on the radio somewhere, but not in this car, not right now. The parking garage is underground. That detail matters in a way the movie knows and uses deliberately. Above ground, when the earthquake hits, you have sky, you have sight lines, you have the horrible but comprehensible image of the world rearranging itself. Underground, you have none of that. You have the noise first. A sound like the building above you deciding all at once to become something else. And then the movement, and then the dark, and then the debris. Nobody plans for a parking garage. The earthquake hit San Francisco with roughly the same force that just took apart Los Angeles, and this city is, in many ways, less prepared for it. The geology is different here. The fill land around the bay is notoriously unstable, the kind of ground that engineers have been warning about for decades. When the shaking starts, it starts everywhere simultaneously, and the underground structure Blake and Daniel are standing in does not hold up the way it was designed to. Concrete comes from above. Not a single catastrophic collapse. Something messier and more terrifying. Structural sections giving way at intervals, each impact sending a new pressure wave through the floor. Cars are being crushed around them. The air fills instantly with dust so thick it functions like fog. Blake and Daniel are separated from the vehicle, moving on instinct toward what might be an exit, and then something catches Blake across the lower leg and pins her. She goes down hard. The pain is immediate and specific. Her leg is trapped, not broken, but locked under concrete debris in a way that she can't shift with her own strength. She calls for Daniel. Dust is everywhere and the noise is still happening. Aftershocks rolling through the structure, and she calls his name again with the particular voice of someone keeping calm because panic would cost them time they don't have. Daniel finds her. He can see the situation. He can see her leg and the slab holding it and what it would take to move it. He can also see his car, still intact, parked 10 feet away, the keys in his pocket. And here's where Iwan Gruffudd does the most interesting work of his performance, because he doesn't play Daniel as a monster. He plays him as a man doing a very ordinary kind of calculation, risk versus reward, self versus other, and coming up with the wrong answer. He doesn't rage at her, he doesn't apologize. He crouches down briefly, and there's something in his expression that might even be genuine conflict. And then the conflict resolves, and he stands up and he walks to the car. Daniel is already in the car when Blake fully understands what's happening. She watches the headlights come on, she watches the reverse lights. She hears the engine fade up the ramp and out of the garage, and then the sound of it is gone, swallowed by the noise of the building still settling around her. He left. That moment, Daniel Riddick driving out of a collapsing parking garage while the woman he was supposed to be responsible for is pinned to the floor inside it, is the film's sharpest moral statement. And what's clever about it is the timing. We already know Daniel is transactional. We already saw him walk away from Emma in the restaurant. The film has been building this portrait methodically across 2 separate acts, and now it completes it. He isn't a villain in the cinematic sense. He doesn't want people hurt. He just, when it comes down to it, will not pay a price for someone else. Some people are like that. A lot of people maybe, if you put them in the right circumstances. That's what makes it land. Blake doesn't cry. That's important. She processes it for maybe 3 seconds. The gone headlights, the empty space where the car was, the settling noise of the structure, and then she's already thinking about what comes next. She starts looking at the slab. She looks at the debris around her. She catalogs what she has and what she can use. Her father's daughter, fully in this moment. She's alone and injured in a partially collapsed underground structure in a city that just absorbed one of the largest earthquakes in recorded history. Take that in for a second. She's 18. She's separated from both parents. The person who was supposed to be her adult supervisor just drove away. Her leg hurts badly enough that she isn't sure about the full extent of the damage. The dust is still in the air. The structure is still making noise. There's no guarantee the next aftershock won't finish what the first one started. And she starts working the problem. This is what Alexandra Daddario brings to Blake that elevates the character beyond the standard disaster movie daughter role, a practical, grounded intelligence that the film trusts enough to actually show. Blake doesn't wait. She looks at what's holding her leg. She tries different angles. She talks herself through it, quietly, the way people do when they need to stay in their own head and not spiral. She finds a piece of rebar she can use as leverage. She tries! The slab doesn't move. She tries again. Nothing. A groan from somewhere above her, another section thinking about giving way, and she goes still, waiting for it to pass. It passes! The film is doing something interesting by giving Blake this extended solo sequence. There's no rescue coming yet. There's no cavalry. There's just her, and the problem, and however much of herself she can bring to bear on it. After 2 acts of disaster happening to characters. Hayes watching the dam fail, Emma being rescued, the city absorbing the earthquake, here's a character actively refusing to be passive. She can't move the slab alone. She accepts that. But she can stay conscious, she can stay focused, she can make noise if she hears anyone above. She can survive the next 10 minutes, and then the 10 after that, and keep surviving in pieces until the situation changes. The situation changes when she hears voices. 2 of them, coming from somewhere above the rubble, from the street level or somewhere close to it. A British accent. 2 British accents, actually, 1 adult and 1 younger. She calls out. They stop. They call back. She tells them she's trapped. A beat of silence. Then the older voice again, closer now, moving toward her. We're coming down! Ben Taylor wasn't supposed to be in San Francisco today. He's a civil engineering student from England, here with his younger brother Ollie for a university visit, one of those informal campus tours that colleges arrange for prospective international students. He's the kind of person who researches things before he arrives, who has a plan for the day, who knows which campus buildings he wants to see and in what order. Ollie, younger and considerably less organized, is mostly along for the trip. The earthquake cancels all of that. They're on the street above the parking garage when the 9.1 hits, exposed, out in the open, which turns out to be the best place to be even though it doesn't feel like it. They go down, ride out the shaking on the pavement, cover their heads. When the main shock passes and they stand up, the street around them looks like a different city, not the one they arrived in, something rawer and more broken. Smoke starting to rise from multiple directions, car alarms going off on every block and then going silent as their systems short out one by one. That's when they hear Blake. Her voice is coming from below, from a ventilation shaft or a gap in the garage structure where the ground has split slightly. Muffled, but clear enough. She's alive and she's telling them where she is, and Ben's engineering brain kicks in before his fear does. He starts moving toward the sound while Ollie looks for a way down. Getting someone's leg free from a concrete slab is not a delicate operation. They find a way into the garage through a partially collapsed side entrance, crawling over debris, test-stepping each surface before trusting it with full weight. Ben finds her fast. He can see immediately what's needed. The slab isn't enormously heavy, but it's positioned wrong for a direct lift, and Blake's angle makes it impossible for her to assist meaningfully. He needs leverage. Or Jack. That's what he needs. Ollie, moving through the scattered vehicles nearby, finds one in the boot of an intact sedan. He brings it back without being asked. The 2 of them work together. Ben positioning the jack under the slab's edge, Ollie steadying Blake and keeping her from pulling her leg prematurely, and the whole operation takes maybe 3 minutes, which is a very long 3 minutes when the ceiling is making noises. The slab lifts. Blake pulls free. She stands on her own, tests the leg, winces but stays upright. Not broken. Badly bruised, maybe a hairline fracture somewhere she can't diagnose without a hospital, which is not currently available. She looks at these 2 strangers who just freed her from a parking garage in an earthquake and says something along the lines of, "Thank you," which is very inadequate, and she knows it. And Ben says something British and understated in response, and that's the beginning of the 3 of them. They move. The street outside is passable but not comfortable. Cracks in the asphalt you can fall into if you're not watching your feet. Fire somewhere 2 blocks south, the smoke smell reaching them before the flames are visible. A water main broken somewhere underground. The road is wet in a way that makes no sense until you follow it back to the source. People are moving, mostly in shock, some with injuries, some just walking with the specific blank expression of people whose brains are still processing what just happened. Ben keeps Ollie close. Blake keeps moving. Her engineering background. She's heading to college for engineering. Following in her father's professional footsteps, even if the exact discipline is different, means she's reading the environment as she goes. Which structures look stable? Which intersections are crossable? She doesn't announce this analysis. She just steers them without making it obvious that she's steering. Ollie, for the record, is handling all of this remarkably well. He's younger, maybe 12 or 13, and he's in a foreign city in a disaster, which should be devastating. And instead, he's asking practical questions and keeping up and generally being more useful than many adults would be in the same situation. Art Parkinson plays him with a kind of unself-conscious competence that's charming specifically because it isn't performed. Ollie doesn't do brave faces, he just does the next thing. The 3 of them find a partially intact electronics store about 2 blocks from the garage, the front window blown out, shelving units toppled inside, but structurally sound enough to enter. Blake goes straight for the components section. She's not looking for a working phone. She's looking for parts. She finds what she needs and starts building something. This sequence is one of the small, genuine pleasures of San Andreas, a disaster movie that, for a few minutes, becomes a problem-solving movie. Blake explains what she's doing to Ben as she works, quickly and without condescension, and you can see him track the technical logic of it and arrive at the conclusion a half-second before she does. They're on the same wavelength. He doesn't take over. She doesn't need him to. They just work. What she builds is a device that boosts the signal on her phone enough to make a call. The earthquake has degraded the network. Towers are down, but not every tower, and with the right signal amplification and the right frequency range, she can punch through the noise. The phone still has signal. Barely. She dials Ray. Ray picks up on the first ring. That says everything you need to know about what he's been doing since the helicopter lifted off. He's been trying to reach her. She can hear it in the half-second before he speaks. The intake of breath that's equal parts relief and terror. The sound of a man who has been imagining the worst and is now getting the opposite. Blake is alive. She's injured but mobile. She's with two people she just met who are helping her. She tells him the street she's on, and then she tells him about Daniel. She keeps it simple, factual. She tells him Daniel was with her in the garage when the earthquake hit, that her leg got trapped, and that he got in his car and drove away. She doesn't frame it dramatically. She doesn't ask Ray for a reaction. She just states it because he needs to know, and stating it is the most efficient thing she can do right now. The silence on Ray's end lasts about 2 seconds. Emma is next to him in the helicopter and can only hear Blake's side of the conversation, but she catches enough. The look on Emma's face when she understands what Daniel did, not just to her, but to her daughter, is something Carla Gugino does entirely without dialogue. A very quiet fury, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't need to. Emma picks up Ray's phone and leaves a voicemail for Daniel. You don't hear exactly what she says. You just see her say it. Precise, controlled, and absolutely final. Whatever Daniel Riddick thought he was to Emma before this day, he is not that thing anymore. Back in San Francisco, Blake has a plan. Coit Tower sits on Telegraph Hill, elevated, visible from most of the northeastern part of the city, and critically, above the tide line. She tells Ray to meet her there. He confirms. She tells him she'll find a way to signal him when they're close. 3 people who didn't know each other an hour ago now have a destination. Ben and Ollie fall in without hesitation, and there's something quietly remarkable about that. They don't know Ray. They don't know Emma. They have no particular reason to attach themselves to Blake's plan beyond the fact that it's a plan. And right now, a plan is more valuable than almost anything else in this city. Ben's the one who freed her from the garage. She's the one who knows where they're going. Ollie's the one who will keep them both from getting too serious about it. The dynamic between the 3 of them forms fast and feels natural. Ben is careful, attentive, maybe a little obvious about his interest in Blake even in the middle of a catastrophe, which is either a character flaw or the most human thing in the movie depending on your disposition. Blake notices and doesn't comment. Ollie definitely notices and also doesn't comment, which takes more restraint than you'd expect from a 12-year-old. They pick their way north through the broken city. The streets are quiet in the wrong way, not peaceful, but post-shock. The initial screaming and car alarms and structure noise giving way to something more eerie. The scale of the destruction announces itself in detail rather than in volume. A bus on its side blocking an entire intersection. An apartment building with its facade sheared away. Individual rooms exposed like a dollhouse opened up. Furniture still in place. A mirror still hanging on a wall with nothing behind it anymore. A fire hydrant turned into a geyser, water arcing 30 feet into the air, completely ignored by everyone walking past it because there are bigger things to be concerned about. Blake keeps her pace steady on the injured leg. She doesn't complain about it. She adjusts her gait and moves. Somewhere above them, unseen, Ray and Emma are closing the distance. The helicopter starts lying to them somewhere over the Central Valley. Not catastrophically, not yet. A gearbox warning light, amber, persistent. Ray checks it and checks it again, runs through the instrument panel with the efficiency of someone who has been reading aircraft warnings long enough to know which ones are suggestions and which ones are sentences. This one is a sentence. The gearbox is degrading. Not immediately fatal, but flying it into San Francisco airspace, already chaotic, already contested with emergency traffic, requiring precise maneuvering at altitude, would be pushing the machine past what it has left, he tells Emma. She doesn't react with panic, which says something about her. She asks how long they have. He gives her a number. She looks at the map. They identify Bakersfield as the closest viable landing point, and that's the entire conversation. Two people who spent years building a shared language for managing crises, still fluent in it even now, even through everything that fractured between them. Divorce doesn't always erase the specific competence that a long partnership builds. Sometimes it just leaves the competence behind, orphaned, still functional. Bakersfield is not where Ray planned to land. The shopping center they put down in is in the middle of its own crisis. No earthquake damage to speak of. They're far enough from the epicenter that the ground here only shook hard enough to knock things from shelves, crack some walls, send people running into the parking lot. But the news has been running continuously, and the news is showing Los Angeles. And what Los Angeles looks like right now has done something to people's sense of what the normal rules are. There's looting. Not the organized, purposeful kind, the opportunistic kind, people moving quickly through broken storefronts, not entirely sure why they're doing it except that everyone else is, and the usual consequences seem suspended. Ray doesn't stop to address it. He and Emma are already moving through the parking lot looking for transportation. They find the truck unlocked. He's in the visor. Ray takes it with the specific efficiency of a man who has made a decision he'll feel bad about later and is filing that guilt away for when there's time. Emma gets in. They're on the highway north inside 4 minutes of landing. The drive is when the movie slows down and breathes, and it earns that. At speed on a mostly clear highway, the Central Valley stretching out on both sides, the devastation of Los Angeles in the rearview mirror, and the devastation of San Francisco still ahead, there's a pocket of relative stillness. No immediate crisis to manage, no structural collapses to navigate, just the truck and the road and two people who have a lot of unspoken things between them and nowhere else to be. At some point between Bakersfield and wherever they are now, something shifts. It's not a dramatic moment. Emma asks a question, something about Blake, something about whether Blake knows she's coming, and Ray answers, and then they're talking. Actually talking, not the operational communication of the helicopter or the careful civility of divorce proceedings. The conversation finds its own level the way water does, settling into something honest because there's no longer any point in performing for each other. They've lost a city, they might lose their daughter. All the reasons to stay guarded feel very small against that. Highway ends. Not gradually, the San Andreas Fault has expressed itself in the landscape with absolute clarity. The road simply stops existing. Where the asphalt was, there's now a fissure running perpendicular to the road for as far as either of them can see in both directions. Not a crack, a gap, a canyon that opened in the last 2 hours and dropped one side of the highway, roughly 15 feet below the other. You could span it with a long enough ladder. You cannot span it with a truck. From the air, before they landed, Ray saw the fault line. He described it to Emma as looking like a scar. Up close, standing at its edge, it looks less like a geological feature and more like a statement. The ground is simply done pretending to be stable. They're not the first people stopped here. An elderly couple has pulled their car to the shoulder maybe 30 yards from the fissure. A man and woman, probably in their 70s, standing outside the car in the way people stand when they've accepted that they aren't going anywhere and aren't sure what to do next. Ray goes over. They talk, and here's where the movie hands Ray and Emma exactly what they need. The old man has a plane. A Cessna or something comparable. Nothing glamorous. The kind of aircraft that weekend pilots keep in a hangar at a private airfield and use for short trips because they love flying and have never quite stopped loving it even after doing it for 40 years. The airfield is close. 2 miles, maybe 3, accessible on a service road that runs parallel to the fault on their side. Ray offers the truck for the plane. The old man doesn't even really negotiate. Maybe he can see what's at stake. Maybe he's the kind of person who would have said yes regardless. Either way, they trade. The airfield is quiet in the way only small private airports can be quiet. A strip of asphalt, a few hangars, a windsock. The world happening everywhere else in California has not quite arrived here yet. Ray does the pre-flight checks while Emma walks the perimeter and thinks. And then she comes back and says Mallory's name. This is the scene the movie has been building towards since the first act. Not the earthquake, not the rescue. This. 2 people standing on a small airfield in the middle of nowhere, about to fly into a burning city to find their daughter, finally saying out loud the thing that has been underneath every other thing for the entire film. Mallory was their younger daughter. She drowned. She and Ray were on a rafting trip. Ray's idea, a spontaneous decision on a good day, the kind of impulsive plan that good fathers make with their kids and that almost always results in nothing except a good memory. Except this time, a flash flood came through without warning, and Mallory was swept away, and Ray was there and couldn't get to her in time. He's been carrying that for years. Not just the grief. The grief is one thing, the specific belief that it was his fault, that if he hadn't suggested the trip, if they'd stayed home, if he'd been faster or stronger or positioned differently in the water, she'd still be alive. That's the thing that fractured him and fractured the marriage and put him in a helicopter 70 hours a week doing rescues he can't stop doing because the alternative is sitting still long enough to hear his own thoughts. Emma tells him she doesn't blame him. She never blamed him. And more than that, she tells him that no one could have saved Mallory, that the circumstances were not fixable by a better version of Ray or a faster version of Ray or a more prepared version of Ray, that loving someone completely and still losing them is not a failure. It is just loss. It is just the worst thing that can happen to a person happening. Dwayne Johnson doesn't do a lot of films that ask him to sit still and be broken. This one does, briefly. He earns it. The physical confidence that makes him so effective in the action sequences makes the stillness in this moment hit differently, because you've spent the whole film watching a man who is always moving, always solving, always in forward motion, and here he stops. Just briefly, just long enough to receive what Emma is saying. He needed to hear it from her specifically. Nobody else could have said it. They don't linger. There's no time, and they both know it. Ray finishes the pre-flight. Emma climbs in. The small plane moves down the strip with the particular unhurried acceleration of a light aircraft, not the surge of a jet, just a gathering of speed, and then the wheels leaving the ground, and then California spreading out beneath them again. San Francisco is ahead. The smoke is visible from 60 miles out, a haze at the horizon that thickens as they close the distance, turning the afternoon light amber and then something darker. Ray flies without speaking. Emma watches the horizon. The grief of Mallory for the first time in years has somewhere to go, not resolved, not healed, but acknowledged, out in the open, where it can be carried by both of them instead of just one. Below, the fault line cuts across the landscape like a signature. The city comes into view. The 9.6 arrives without any additional warning. Not that additional warning would have helped much. The city is still processing the first earthquake. People are in the streets, emergency services are overwhelmed, the infrastructure that would carry a second alert is already compromised. The ground has barely stopped moving from the initial shock when the fault releases again, deeper this time, longer, with an energy release that makes the first event look like a rehearsal. California has never recorded a 9.6. Nobody alive has felt one. Ray sees it before he feels it. From the air and the small plane already approaching the Bay Area, he watches the city shudder. Buildings that survived the first quake do not survive the second. Downtown skyline, already ragged and smoking from the 9.1, loses several more stories of recognizable structure, towers dropping their upper floors in slow cascades of concrete and steel that from altitude look almost graceful until you remember what's inside them. Bridges flex. The bay itself seems to ripple. The plane hits the turbulence created by the lateral force of the quake, the ground moving fast enough that it disturbs the air above it, an effect most people don't know earthquakes can have. Ray grips the controls and doesn't fight it, rides it, lets the plane find its own level. Emma has both hands on the doorframe and says nothing. There is no runway. SFO is either unusable or inaccessible or both. Every airport in the Bay Area with an intact strip is either on fire or has earthquake damage across its approach. Ray looks at the instruments and looks at the city and makes the calculation fast. They need to get down. They need to get down now. And they need somewhere flat and open. AT&T Park is the only open space large enough. Except they can't land there either. Not conventionally. The approach is obstructed and the field surface, even from altitude, looks compromised. Cracks across the outfield, a section of the stadium's upper deck sheared away. Ray pulls the plane up in circles once and looks at Emma, and she looks back at him, and they both know what this means. There are parachutes on board, because Ray keeps parachutes on board, which is either excellent foresight or the behavior of a man who has spent enough time in dangerous situations to prepare for the worst-case version of all of them. Parachuting into a city that's actively collapsing is not a controlled experience. They go anyway, out over the stadium, low enough that the chutes have just enough time to deploy before the field comes up fast. Ray lands clean, a lifetime of physical training absorbed into muscle memory that doesn't require thought. Emma lands harder, rolls, comes up breathing. Neither of them looks back at the plane. They're on the ground in San Francisco. Hayes is on every screen in America by now. He got the broadcast access he needed. Finally, not because people suddenly believed him, but because Los Angeles happened, and then San Francisco happened, and at a certain point, a scientist saying, "This is what I predicted, and here is what comes next," stops being a fringe position and starts being the only person in the room with a map. What comes next is a tsunami. The earthquake has displaced an enormous section of the Pacific seafloor. The energy from that displacement is moving toward the California coast in a wave, not the Hollywood version with a wall of water visible from the beach, but the real version, which is faster and more powerful and less telegraphed. It will reach the Bay Area within the hour. Everything at sea level, everything along the waterfront, the low-lying districts, the bay shore, needs to be evacuated uphill, now. Hayes says this clearly, without hedging, without the careful academic qualifications he might have used a week ago. There's no career left to protect. There's no research grant to lose. His friend died at Hoover Dam, and 2 major American cities are in ruins, and he has nothing left to preserve except the information itself. People start moving for high ground. Blake, Ben, and Ollie are not at sea level yet, but they're not far enough above it. They've made it to the base of Telegraph Hill, which is progress. The hill rises steeply, and Quake Tower sits at the top of it, white and cylindrical, a landmark visible from most of the northeastern city. That was the plan. That's where Blake told Ray to meet them. Quake Tower is on fire! Not smoldering, burning, actively, with the particular ferocity of a structure that has absorbed seismic damage to its gas lines and then met an ignition source. The path up is blocked. The top of the hill is unreachable. Blake stops and stares at it for a moment, not in despair, but in the quick recalibration of someone who has been processing bad information all day and has gotten good at updating the plan. She tells Ben and Ollie they're not going up. They need higher ground regardless, somewhere visible and open, somewhere Ray can spot them from a boat or a vehicle. She thinks through the options. Nob Hill is west and north. Historically one of the highest points in this part of the city, steep residential streets climbing to a plateau where the old hotels and apartment buildings cluster. It's further. The terrain between here and there is uncertain. But the elevation is real, and elevation is the only currency that matters right now. Ben doesn't argue. He'd already looked at the tower and come to the same conclusion. Ollie says something. A dry observation, unimpressed, the kind of comment that shouldn't land given the circumstances and somehow does anyway. He's that kind of kid. The 3 of them turn west. The streets up to Nob Hill are steep on a normal day. Right now, they're an obstacle course. Staircases that run between the streets. San Francisco's solution to gradients too aggressive for normal sidewalks have become rivers of debris and loose stone. Cars have rolled. Flower pots, awnings, structural components, the mundane contents of 1,000 apartments are spread across every surface. The fires from multiple directions are giving the light a quality that doesn't belong in late afternoon, orange and heavy, the smoke sitting low. Blake's leg is holding, which is something. She sets the pace and doesn't apologize for it not being faster. Ben matches it without comment. Ollie, who has more energy than either of them and seemingly no self-preservation instinct, scouts a few steps ahead and reports back like a small, hyperactive navigator. The 3 of them have developed a functional rhythm, the kind that only happens when people are under enough pressure to skip the social negotiation entirely and go straight to what works. They move. They keep moving. Down at the waterfront, Ray and Emma are dealing with a different problem. The docks are a wreck. Piers shifted off their pilings, mooring lines snapped, several vessels capsized or listing badly. The water in the bay is strange, moving in ways that tidal water doesn't move, precursor chop from the tsunami still far out at sea but already making itself felt. A seagull, somewhere, is screaming at nothing. The boat is tied to a dock that's half underwater. It's an aluminum motorboat, nothing remarkable, the kind used for bay tours or fishing, functional and unbeautiful. The dock it's attached to has subsided on one side, leaving it at an angle, but the lines are still holding. Ray unties it. The motor, when he pulls the cord, starts on the second try. Emma looks at the skyline while he brings the boat around. This is her city, in some sense. She lives here, or she did, and standing on the waterfront looking at what it's become is a different experience from seeing it from the air. Up in the plane, the destruction had the quality of a map, organized and distant. Here, it's close enough to feel. She gets in the boat. Ray points it across the bay, toward the smoke and the buildings and wherever Blake is in the middle of all of it. The motor makes a small, ordinary sound against the weight of everything around it. They cross the water fast. Hayes watches the instruments confirm what he already knows. The tsunami is closer than the last projection. The window for evacuation is narrowing. He's on the phone with every emergency management contact he has left, feeding real-time data, talking through the projections, doing the only thing he can still do, which is make sure whoever can hear him understands exactly how much time remains. There isn't much. The wave won't announce itself the way people expect. There's no slow rise, no obvious wall approaching the shore. The water will recede first, an enormous and unnatural pulling back, the bay going shallow in a way it shouldn't, and then the return, carrying everything it picked up on the way out. He tells them to go higher, he tells them to go as high as they can get. Somewhere in San Francisco, a girl with a damaged leg and 2 borrowed companions is doing exactly that, climbing through smoke and broken streets toward a hill that might be high enough. It has to be high enough. The water pulls back first. That's the thing about tsunamis that most people don't know until they're standing at the edge of it. The wave announces itself by taking, not giving. The bay goes strange. The waterline recedes in a way that has nothing to do with tide, pulling back dozens of yards in under a minute, exposing the dark, muddy floor of the bay, stranding small boats on their sides, leaving the dock pilings standing in open air. Fish are flopping somewhere. The exposed bottom of the bay smells like everything that's been sitting under all that water for a long time. The people who are still at sea level see this and don't understand it. Some of them walk toward it curious. Some pull out phones. A few, the ones who've read the right article or happen to watch the right documentary, turn and run immediately, screaming at the people around them to do the same. Hayes is still broadcasting. His voice, by now, has the particular exhausted clarity of a man who has been right about everything and wishes desperately that he hadn't been. He's saying the words move uphill with the repetitive urgency of someone who knows that repetition is the only tool left. On the boat, Ray sees the horizon change. He's most of the way across the bay when it happens. That shift at the edge of vision where the Pacific, already disturbed and unpredictable from the seismic displacement, begins to organize itself into something directional. It doesn't look like the movies. It's not a vertical wall of water from the first moment. It's more like the horizon thickening, the sea rising incrementally and then not so incrementally, a mass of dark water that takes up more and more of the skyline the closer it gets to the coast. Then it does look like the movies. By the time the wave reaches the mouth of the bay, it has built itself into something that belongs in a different category from normal water. It carries everything the ocean picked up on its way in: debris, vessels, containers from the commercial shipping anchorage, a cargo ship that got caught in the surge and is now moving at a speed and in a direction that no cargo ship should ever move. Ray opens the throttle all the way. He is not outrunning it. He's trying to get to Blake before it arrives. Daniel Riddick chose the Golden Gate Bridge. Why, exactly, is the film's business and not something it spends much time on? He got out of San Francisco ahead of the worst damage, apparently, made it to the bridge while the road was still passable. Maybe he was trying to get to Marin. Maybe he just defaulted to the most famous exit point from a city he was trying to leave. The bridge, at this moment, is clogged with other people who had the same idea. Cars stopped in both directions, people out of their vehicles, looking south at the smoke and looking west at the water, and beginning to understand that neither option is good. The cargo ship hits the bridge. Not a glancing blow, a direct impact, the ship's superstructure shearing into the bridge's midspan, the collision producing a sound that the film wisely keeps at full volume without musical overlay. A section of roadway drops, a suspension cable, under load that it was never designed to handle, snaps and whips across the deck. A shipping container, torn free from the ship's deck by the impact, falls. It falls onto Daniel Riddick's car. The film is neither triumphant nor mournful about this. It just shows it. One moment he's there, the next the container is where his car was, and the wave is already moving under the bridge. There's no final speech, no moment of recognition or regret. The character who abandoned 2 women in a single day gets the ending. The film decided he deserved, delivered without comment. The wave passes the bridge and keeps coming. Blake, Ben, and Ollie are not going to make it to Nob Hill. Tsunami warning has reached them, through someone's phone, through people running past them on the street, through the simple evidence of the ocean behaving wrongly in their peripheral vision as they climbed. The hill is close, but not close enough. The water is going to arrive before they reach elevation that means anything. Blake makes the call fast. The gate is Daniel's building, the unfinished skyscraper his company has been developing in San Francisco, the one she arrived at with him hours ago that now feels like it belongs to a different version of the day. It's unfinished, but it's tall. Structurally, it survived the earthquakes, or enough of it did. The upper floors are well above any water level that makes sense. If they can get high enough inside it, they can ride this out. She's already moving toward it when she tells Ben and Ollie the plan. The lobby of the gate is open because unfinished buildings don't have locked lobbies. The interior is raw, exposed concrete columns, bare floors, plastic sheeting over sections of wall, construction equipment parked at the periphery. Emergency lighting on battery backup throws everything in low amber. The elevator isn't running, but the stairwell is accessible and intact. They go up. The wave hits the building on the third step. Not that they hear it as a wave exactly, they hear the building change. A pressure, a resonance in the concrete, a sound like everything outside the walls being rearranged by something enormous. Then the water comes in through the lobby level. Not a slow seep, but a fast, forceful inrush, shoving through every opening at ground level simultaneously, carrying the things it collected on its way through the city, debris, furniture, vehicles, the accumulated wreckage of a street. They're 2 floors above the lobby. The water is moving up fast. 50 feet of building. Then 60. The water rises with a speed that shouldn't be physically possible until you remember the volume behind it. Not just the wave, but everything. The wave pushed ahead of itself. All the water that was displaced by an earthquake large enough to rearrange the ocean floor. The building is filling from the bottom up, and the only direction that helps is up. Ben gets Ollie above the waterline and keeps him there. Blake is at the stairwell door, checking the level, watching the numbers. They have time. They climb. They keep climbing. On the 6th floor, the water stops rising for about 4 seconds. Then a secondary surge, a reflected wave bouncing off the hillside behind the city, rebounding through the streets, arriving at the gate from a different direction, hits the building with a lateral force that the structure, already compromised and already holding more water than it was built for, is not ready for. A section of the floor gives way. Blake goes under. It happens fast, and then everything slows down the way things slow down when the oxygen situation becomes urgent. She's in the water inside the building. Not the bay, not the open ocean, but the enclosed flooding interior of a half-built skyscraper, which is its own specific nightmare because there are walls, there are corners, there are construction materials and metal fixtures and things to be caught on. She's a strong swimmer, her father taught her, years of it. The water was always a Ray Gaines thing, the outdoors and physical competence passed down deliberately. But strong swimming doesn't help when the current is interior and the light is wrong and the surface is blocked by floating debris. She can't see clearly enough to navigate. She goes for the surface and hits something. Tries again. Different angle. Hits something else. The light through the water is the amber of the emergency backup systems, filtered and strange, giving her just enough visibility to see that she's disoriented, that the surface she's reaching for may not be the right surface. Her lungs are starting to express an opinion about all of this. Ben is up above and he can see her through the water, through the floor that partially gave way, through the murk of the flooded level below. He can see her shape. He can see that she's not moving right. Ollie grabs his arm. He's already looking for a way down. Outside the building, Ray's boat clears the last of the open water and hits the flooded street, the hull dragging briefly over asphalt before floating again as the water deepens around the building foundations. He cuts the motor, stands up in the boat, looks at the gate. He can't see Blake. Emma is next to him, scanning every floor, every window, every opening. The building is dark except for that amber backup light, and the water around its base is still churning, still carrying things in from the bay. Ray cups his hands and shouts Blake's name at the building. No answer comes back. He looks at Emma. Emma looks at the building. There's glass in those upper floors, full-height windows on what was supposed to be the building's premium residential levels, still intact, still showing the interior. Through one of them, through the distortion and the murk, Ray sees something, a shape in the water on a flooded level, a shape that isn't moving the way a person moves when they're choosing not to move. He's already in the water before Emma has finished saying his name. The water inside. The gate is not clean. It's carrying everything the tsunami pushed through the city on its way here. Silt, debris, oil from ruptured vehicle tanks, the dark particulate of 100 broken things. Visibility inside the flooded level is maybe 4 feet in any direction. Ray is swimming through a building, which means there are walls coming at him and corners he can't see and structural elements hanging down from the compromised ceiling above, and he's doing it by feel as much as by sight. Finding her takes 11 seconds. That's not a long time in any objective measure. In the water, in the dark, searching a flooded floor of a building that's still groaning around you. 11 seconds is a very long time. He finds her by her hair first. She's wedged slightly against a section of collapsed interior wall, the current having pushed her there and then held her. She's not struggling. She's not fighting the water. She's still in the way that people go still when the body has spent its available oxygen and started on the reserves and is now past the point of making decisions. Ray gets her free and kicks for the surface. They break the water on a floor that's still partially above the floodline, a section of the 6th level where the collapse was uneven, leaving a pocket of air maybe chest high against the far wall. Ben is already there. He gets to Ray before Ray has fully cleared the water, gets his hands under Blake's shoulders, helps bring her up. She's not breathing. Ben says it, but Ray already knows. It can feel it in the absence of tension in her. That specific limpness that has nothing to do with unconsciousness and everything to do with what comes after. He gets her onto the floor, tilts her head, checks her airway, clears it, locks his hands together over her sternum. The chest compressions are the loneliest sound in the film, not the earthquake, not the tsunami. The rhythmic, mechanical sound of a father doing CPR on his daughter on the wet floor of a flooding building, counting under his breath, refusing to acknowledge any outcome except the one where she comes back. Dwayne Johnson plays this without performance. No tears, no spoken pleas, no looking at the ceiling, just the compressions, just the count, just the work. Because the work is the only thing that matters, and stopping the work means accepting something he will not accept. Ollie is pressed against the wall behind Ben, watching. Ben's jaw is set. He's not looking away. Emma is outside. She's in the boat, circling the building's perimeter, looking for Ray, looking for any opening that gives her access to the interior. The water around the building is still moving, not with the initial tsunami force, but with the residual churn of a city's worth of floodwater finding its level. The ground floor is fully submerged. The 2nd and 3rd floors are partially accessible through blown-out windows. She spots the emergency lighting through the glass on the 6th floor. She can see the amber glow of the backup system. She can't see Ray, can't see Blake, but the light is there, and that's a floor above the floodline, and that's where she needs to be. The boat's aluminum hull is not designed to be a battering ram. Emma uses it as one anyway. She opens the throttle and aims the bow at the window. The glass, full height, commercial grade, designed for a luxury residential tower, holds for the first impact. She backs up, goes again harder, the boat's motor screaming at the load. The 2nd impact punches through, the glass collapsing inward in a sheet, the boat's nose riding up over the sill and grinding to a stop halfway through the opening. She climbs over the bow into the building. Ray is on the 15th compression when Blake breathes. Not smoothly. Not the movie version where the eyes open gently and the patient says something meaningful. She convulses, turns to her side, expels water in the violent and unglamorous way that the body handles it, gasps once and then again with the particular desperation of lungs relearning their job after being reminded how much they need to do it. Ray's hands stop. He doesn't speak immediately. He watches her breathe, and his face does something that the rest of the film hasn't asked it to do. It falls apart, briefly, in the specific way of a person who has been holding themselves together through sheer forward momentum and has just run out of road. The grief of Mallory, the fear that has been driving everything, the 2 years of blaming himself for being too slow and too late, all of it surfaces at once in the half-second before he pulls Blake against him. She's alive. She's breathing, confused, wet, alive, her hand coming up to grip his arm, the first voluntary movement she's made since she went under. This moment always gets me. Not because it's sentimental, though it is. Because the film has spent 2 hours building to it without making it feel constructed. The earthquake, the cross-state journey, the Mallory conversation on the airfield, the CPR, all of it is this scene's architecture. And the scene itself is quiet. No score surge, no dramatic lighting shift. Just a man and his daughter on a wet floor and her hand on his arm. Emma arrives through the broken window and crosses the floor and drops to her knees next to both of them. No words for a moment. The 3 of them, fractured family, earthquake survivors, people who have just lived through the most specific version of each of their fears, are briefly just together, holding on. Ben exhales. He's been holding that breath since the compression started. Ollie says something. It's probably the wrong thing and also exactly the right thing, and everybody almost laughs, which is the closest the movie gets to relief before it remembers there are still several floors of compromised building above them. The gate is not done with them. The secondary water surge that knocked Blake off the floor is still working through the building's structure, and the structural damage that the 2 earthquakes did isn't the kind that improves with time and floodwater. Something above them shifts. A sound, deep, resonant, not the creak of one beam but the complaint of many, runs through the walls. The building is deciding. Ray gets Blake up, Ben has Ollie. Emma leads to the window, the one she came through, the one with the boat still wedged in it, the nose inside and the stern out over the water. Getting 5 people through a partially shattered window frame and into an aluminum boat while a building is actively destabilizing is a physical problem with a narrow margin, and the film runs at its speed. Ray lifts Blake through first, Emma next. Ollie! Ben practically throwing him into the boat. Ben himself moving fast, getting a hand from Ray on the way. Ray last, the floor behind him developing a new creak as he clears the window. The boat drops back to the water level and Emma has the motor running. Behind them, the section of building they just left finishes its deliberation. The 6th floor, already compromised at the structural level, already holding more water than the engineers ever accounted for, gives way in stages. Not a dramatic single collapse, but a progressive failure, one section pulling another, the sound of it chasing the boat across the water and then falling behind as Emma pushes the throttle open. Nobody looks back. That's a choice. Not a failure of nerve, but the opposite. There's nothing behind them that helps anymore. Everything that matters is in the boat. Ray has his arm around Blake, who is sitting up, shivering, watching the water with the expression of someone cataloging an experience they'll spend a long time processing. Ben is next to Ollie. Emma is driving. The boat clears the flooded streets and finds the open water of the bay. San Francisco behind them is burning in patches and smoking in others, a skyline that has been fundamentally rearranged. The places where buildings used to be visible now as gaps and rubble, and the particular quality of sky that only shows when something solid is no longer blocking it. The tsunami has gone through and gone back, and the water is receding, leaving behind everything it collected on its way in. The scale of it is enormous. Ray looks at it. He looks at Blake. He looks at Emma, who is looking at him. The math of the last several hours. Everything lost. Everything that almost went wrong. Everything that was said on an airfield that needed to be said settles into a different kind of weight. Not lighter, just carried differently. Blake reaches over and takes Emma's hand without saying anything. Emma keeps driving. A relief camp is nobody's idea of an ending. Tents and emergency lighting and Red Cross workers moving with the focused efficiency of people doing the most important work they know how to do. Cots and blankets and hot coffee that tastes like it came out of a machine, but nobody's complaining. The survivors from the gate arrive by boat and are met by people with flashlights and medical kits, and the mundane machinery of disaster relief, intake forms, triage, the ordinary logistics of keeping people alive after the extraordinary has finished trying to kill them, begins. Blake gets her leg properly assessed. Bruised badly, no fracture, will hurt for weeks. Ben and Ollie get checked out and cleared. Emma has a cut above her hairline from the helicopter rooftop that's been bleeding slowly since Los Angeles, and now gets actual attention. Ray sits on the edge of a cot and doesn't move for a while. He hasn't slept. You can see that. 5 people made it out of the gate. 5 people who, at various points in the last several hours, had no particular reason to expect they would. The math of it sits differently when you're on the other side of it, when the emergency is over and the body is still running the adrenaline it no longer needs and there's nothing left to solve or escape or fight through. What comes after the catastrophe is quieter and stranger than the catastrophe itself, and San Andreas is honest enough to sit in that for a moment before it wraps things up. Ray and Emma find a quiet corner of the camp. They don't have a big conversation. The big conversations have already happened. On the airfield, in the helicopter, in all the small exchanges across a day that stripped away every reason to be guarded with each other. What's left doesn't need words the way those moments did. Ray puts his arm around her and she leans into him and they look out at the bay, at the ruined skyline on the far shore, at the smoke that's still rising from a dozen places in the city they can no longer reach. Whatever they're going to be to each other now is different from what they were this morning. Both of them know it. Neither of them needs to say it tonight. Hayes is watching the news feeds from a makeshift operations center somewhere on the east side of the bay. Monitor screens, data feeds, the collected footage from news helicopters that captured what happened to the city from above. He looks at all of it and doesn't look satisfied, which is correct, because satisfaction would be the wrong thing to feel. He was right. Being right cost Kim Park his life, and cost California 2 cities, and cost thousands of people everything they had. Vindication, when it arrives like this, doesn't feel like winning. What it feels like, and Paul Giamatti carries this without a word of dialogue in his final scene, is responsibility. His algorithm worked. His predictions were accurate. The next question, the one that will define whatever career he has left, is what gets built differently because of it. Which cities reinforce their infrastructure? Which fault lines get monitored with the systems he developed? Whether the knowledge that cost so much to prove actually changes anything? That question stays open. The film doesn't answer it. That's the right call. The American flag goes up last. Someone in the relief camp, not a named character, not anyone the film has invested time in, just a person in the background doing something that felt right to them, raises a flag over the camp as the dawn light comes in over the bay. The film's final shot holds on it. The flag against the ruined skyline, the city broken behind it, the sun coming up over the water. It's a lot. It knows it's a lot. And honestly, it earns it. Because the whole film has been about this. Not the earthquake, not the spectacle, but the people underneath the spectacle. The family that broke and came back together under pressure that would have finished most things permanently. Ray and Emma lost Mallory and almost lost Blake and spent 2 years not saying the things that needed saying, and this single catastrophic day cracked all of that open and let something breathe that had been sealed up and going stale. The flag isn't jingoism. It's the movie saying, people are still here, things survive, life starts again even when it starts in rubble. Blake and Ben, sitting together nearby, are doing that thing where 2 people are talking about something else, but are really just figuring out whether this is going to be something. Given that they freed each other from collapsing structures and survived a tsunami together, the awkward early stages of something energy is both wildly inappropriate for the setting and completely charming. Ollie watches them both with the knowing expression of a younger sibling who has been waiting for everyone else to catch up. Okay, step back. What do you do with a city that's been broken? And what do you do with a movie that breaks it? Here's the honest take on San Andreas. It's exactly the film it sets out to be. And that film is not trying to be Interstellar or The Revenant or anything with awards season ambitions. It's a disaster blockbuster built around Dwayne Johnson rescuing his family. And within those parameters, it's genuinely, effectively excellent. The set pieces hold up. The Hoover Dam sequence is still one of the best practical CGI blends in the film's genre. It builds correctly, it pays off correctly, and it uses a real and famous structure in a way that bypasses your suspension of disbelief entirely. The tsunami sequence is enormous in scale, without losing the thread of individual human stakes inside it, which is the hardest balance in disaster filmmaking to maintain. The helicopter rooftop rescue in Los Angeles is tightly constructed and emotionally grounded. These aren't lucky moments in an otherwise mediocre film. They're the result of craft. Dwayne Johnson is doing more here than people gave him credit for at the time. The CPR scene alone, the stillness of it, the refusal to oversell the emotion, shows a performer who understood that restraint is what that moment needed, and who had the discipline to trust that understanding even in a film that elsewhere goes very large, very often. The Mallory sequence in Part 6 works because he earns it across the preceding hour. You believe his grief because you've watched it move underneath everything else for the entire film. Alexandra Daddario's Blake is the genuine secret weapon. Disaster movies live or die on whether you care about the people caught in them, and Blake is written and performed as a complete person. Resourceful, warm, scared in the right ways, capable in ways she doesn't announce. The garage sequence, where she's alone and injured and just starts working the problem, is better character writing than most disaster films bother with. Where does it fall short? A few places. The science sequences, while necessary for plot logistics, occasionally slow the film's momentum in ways that the editing doesn't fully recover from. Paul Giamatti is doing everything he can with Hayes, but the character scenes can feel like mandatory pit stops on the way back to the Johnson family storyline. Daniel Riddick's death, while poetically delivered and narratively satisfying, is a little too neat. Disaster movies have an obligation to let bad outcomes occasionally reach people who don't fully deserve them, and when every story thread resolves in the most morally satisfying direction simultaneously, there's a slight sense of the universe being tidier than it actually is. The American flag ending is going to be too much for some viewers. If you find the image earnest beyond what you can accept, the film probably lost you 30 seconds before the credits. That's a fair response. It's an unambiguously patriotic image at the end of an unambiguously emotional film, and it asks you to come along without apology. But here's the thing about San Andreas that I keep coming back to. It respects the emotional stakes it sets up. When Ray performs CPR on Blake, the film doesn't cut away. It doesn't resolve the tension with a musical cue before the outcome is clear. It sits in the uncertainty, makes you hold your breath, and trust that the scene is strong enough to carry the silence. That's not a given in this genre. Plenty of films at this budget level with this kind of star would have hedged that moment into safety. This one doesn't. The family at the center of it, fractured by grief, moving toward each other across a continent that's literally falling apart beneath them, gives the spectacle somewhere to land. Without Ray and Emma and Blake, the earthquakes are just impressive CGI. With them, every collapsing building has personal stakes attached to it. That's the transaction the film makes with its audience in the first act, and it honors that transaction all the way to the end. San Andreas is a film that knows exactly what it is and executes it with commitment, scale, and more emotional intelligence than it gets credit for. It's not trying to be the best film of 2015. It's trying to be the best version of itself. Mission accomplished. If this breakdown hit different for you, if you've been watching the whole way through or you're discovering this film for the first time, do me a favor and hit like. Subscribe if you want more of these long-form deep dives because there are a lot more films where this came from and I'm not running out of things to say about them anytime soon. Drop a comment and tell me, when Ray performs CPR on Blake, did you hold your breath? Because every time, no matter how many times I've watched it, I still do. Until next time, stay safe out there. And maybe don't build anything on a fault line.